That I think I'd be highly dubious of over any any time scale shorter than 20 years. I think, the amount of momentum behind JavaScript is just so enormous. And that momentum, even if Wasm had all the features I just listed and any of the downsides were mitigated, just the amount of momentum behind JavaScript um, would keep it going, as there's just a lot of value in an ecosystem that's active and innovating. Um, the way that JavaScript may be implemented may change over time. Over time, as especially as the Wasm feature set grows, it may become decreasingly silly to run JavaScript on top of Wasm. So just as an implementation technique to improve the sandboxing of the browser, you may see JavaScript engines actually internally compiling the JavaScript to Wasm. So everyone would be using Wasm in that case, and JavaScript would just, and also in some sense, they're different category, right? JavaScript's a language, Wasm's a compile target. So in some, by, one day it may be the case that JavaScript gets sandboxed by Wasm. But just as a language, is it the most, I think the most popular by a factor language in the world, depending how you measure. So that's not going away.
Yeah, so one of the things that I would say, just in answer to that question, is I think that there will be a point where Wasm technically could replace JavaScript, and I don't think that's that far away. But depending, I mean, it's not 10 years in the future. It's the next few years. But I think, will it ever replace JavaScript? It's like, will Firefox ever be written entirely in Rust? And the answer is probably not. Will Facebook rewrite everything in some other programming language and compile that to WebAssembly? And the answer is no. It's just never going to happen. They're not going to take everything they've done in the last 20 years and flush it down the toilet. But could that whole JS library that Facebook has been working on all those years run in Wasm, in JavaScript on top of Wasm? And the answer is maybe. So I don't know. That's kind of my 2 cents worth. Do you have more to add to that, Luke?
I would think Wasm's most successful outcome would be JavaScript is still a significant percentage of all development and maintains an active, healthy ecosystem. But then there's just a sibling ecosystem, which is just some other language that suits a different set of needs and programmer personalities. Maybe folks who like static types more.
Yeah.
and they can have just as good of an experience and not like a second class. At the moment, Wasm's like, it's been described by some as as JavaScript's x87 coprocessor. It's kind of a amusing initial statement. We're trying to grow out of that one, but there's this feeling of it augments JavaScript in a sense, and that's not always the case when you have these whole script imports. That's not quite the case, but I think that the successful outcome will be you'll be having an equally good experience when you're using like a pure Wasm stack.
Yeah. The thing that I would describe it as is to me, Wasm represents language choice, and that means that JavaScript is inevitably part of that, right? Because language choice includes JavaScript. It includes Kotlin. It includes Scala, JS, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, that's really, will everybody have language choice? Does language choice include JavaScript? And the answer is, of course, it will. So